April 10, 1912, Southampton Port, England. That day, the dock was packed with people. Some were crying, some were laughing, some were waving goodbye. They were sending off a ship. That ship was the largest thing humanity had ever built. She weighed 46,000 tons. She was 3 football fields long. She was 11 stories tall. She had 4 smokestacks. She had 20,000 light bulbs. Her boilers needed 250 men, 24 hours a day, shoveling coal. Her name was the Titanic. That year, every newspaper in the world wrote about her. They said, this ship was a miracle. They said, even God could not sink her. That line was not advertising. That line came from the engineers. Because the bottom of this ship was divided into 16 watertight compartments. Even if 4 of them flooded, she would still float. They had calculated, this number was safer than any ship in history. That afternoon, 2,200 people walked up the gangplank and boarded the Titanic. Among them were the richest people and the poorest people. The richest was John Jacob Astor. That year, he was the wealthiest man in America. He had just remarried, his bride was 29 years younger. He was bringing his pregnant young wife back to New York from a European honeymoon. He booked the most expensive first-class suite. That room cost $4,500 a week. Back then, a worker's whole annual salary was $600. There was another man named Isidore Straus. He was the owner of Macy's department store in New York. He was traveling with his wife of 40 years, Ida. They also booked first class. And Benjamin Guggenheim. And John Thayer. And a dozen other American millionaires. Up in the top floor ballroom, they drank champagne. In the first-class dining room, they ate 12-course dinners. Their plates were sterling silver. Their glasses were crystal. Their chairs were French oak shipped over from Paris. And then on the lowest deck was the 4th class, packed with immigrants from Ireland, workers from Italy, cooks from China. Whole families of 5 crammed into one tiny room. Their beds were stacked bunks. Their meals were bread and soup. But none of them complained. Because for them, they were going to America. They were going to a new life. They felt lucky. They had boarded the safest ship of the century. April 10th, the ship sailed. April 11th, they reached Ireland. April 12th, they entered the Atlantic. April 13th, calm seas, beautiful stars. April 14th, the 4th day of the voyage. That night, the temperature dropped suddenly. -2 degrees Celsius. Every experienced sailor knew, at that temperature, there are icebergs. That day, the Titanic's wireless room received 7 telegrams. All 7 were warnings. All 7 said, icebergs ahead. But Captain Edward Smith did not slow down. He thought, the ship is so big. An iceberg would just scrape her. He had to reach New York on time. He wanted to set the record for fastest Atlantic crossing. That night, 11:40. The lookout in the crow's nest was named Frederick Fleet. He was 24 years old. He reached for the binoculars. But the key to the binocular case, somebody had taken it on the previous voyage and never returned it. He had to use his bare eyes. And in that moment, he saw it. Straight ahead, on the dark sea. A white mountain. He rang the warning bell 3 times. He grabbed the phone and called the bridge. He shouted as loud as he could. Iceberg, right ahead. The first officer on the bridge was William Murdoch. He immediately ordered. Hard to port, full reverse. But this ship was too big. Big things do not turn. She needed a kilometer to stop. She needed 30 seconds to turn. The iceberg was 300 meters ahead. Fleet watched. Watched the ship slowly, drifting left. The iceberg scraped along her starboard side. On the surface, it looked fine. The first officer breathed out. He thought, we made it. But he didn't know what was happening underneath. The bottom of the iceberg cut open the Titanic's right hull. From the bow, all the way to the sixth compartment. 90 meters long. 6 watertight compartments, breached at the same time. The engineers had calculated when they designed her. The Titanic could survive 4 flooded compartments. Not 6. 6 meant she was already lost. But of the 2,200 people on board, not one of them knew. The ballroom on the top floor, the music was still playing. The first-class dinner was still going. That orchestra, 8 men, were still playing the violins. Half an hour later, the captain called the chief designer, Thomas Andrews, to the bridge. Andrews went down to the lower decks. He looked at the water gauges. He looked up at the captain. He said, "This ship has less than 2 hours." The captain stood frozen for 3 seconds. Then he ordered, "Prepare the lifeboats." The Titanic's lifeboats, 20 in total, could carry 1,178 people. But there were 2,200 people on board. The gap was 1,022. 1,000 people with no lifeboat. Why? Because the men who designed the ship thought a ship that even God could not sink did not need that many lifeboats. The captain ordered, "Women and children first." That night, the wife of the Macy's owner, Ida Strauss. Someone helped her into a lifeboat. She sat down. But 3 seconds later, she stood up. She climbed back out. She returned to the deck. She walked to her husband. She took his hand. She said, "I have been with you for 40 years. For 40 years, we have never been apart. And tonight, we still won't be." She held her husband's hand. The two of them sat down on a deck chair. And they waited. The richest man in America, John Jacob Astor. He put his pregnant wife in a lifeboat. He stayed on the ship. He leaned against the railing, waving to her. He said, "You go first, I will be right behind. I will see you in New York." The lifeboat was lowered, slowly, into the sea. His wife watched him get smaller. And then disappear. 2:20 in the morning. The Titanic broke in half. The stern rose straight up, vertical. The propellers came out of the water, spinning in the sky. And then she sank. Slowly, down to the bottom of the sea. 1,500 people fell into the freezing water, -2 degrees. 40 minutes later, every voice was gone. The 700 who survived sat in the lifeboats and watched. The last sound they heard was the orchestra's violins. That orchestra, 8 men. From the moment the ship began to tilt, they stood on the deck. They started to play. They played until the ship went down. 8 men, not one survived. The last song they played was called "Nearer, My God, to Thee." It is a hymn. A song from the church. They knew they were going to die. And they chose a song that could send them to heaven. Why didn't they run? Why didn't they fight for a lifeboat? Nobody knows. But the people who survived all remembered. In those last minutes, the whole ship could hear that music. That music made many people less afraid. They felt, at least someone is staying with us. So those 8 men, they were not drowned by the sea. They chose to stay. You think, the bigger you build, the safer you are. You think the richest people can buy the best seats. You think the smartest engineers can calculate every danger. But on that one night, the richest and the poorest were in the same sea. The first-class champagne glasses sank to the bottom. The fourth-class bread sank to the bottom. The place where they all finally slept was the same place. The iceberg never asked, "Was your ticket first class or fourth class?" This was 1912. It has been more than 100 years. You think we have learned. You think the ships we build now are safer. You think the people now are humbler. Look at your phone. Look at the city you live in. Look at the job you have. You think these things will not sink. What the Titanic teaches us is not that big ships sink. It is that anything will sink the moment the man who built it believes he has beaten God.